You know how Japan has this incredible reputation for longevity? We're talking about a place where people don't just live a long time, but often maintain remarkable health and vitality well into their 90s and beyond.
Pretty amazing, yeah.
And you sent us this stack of articles, research papers, and notes diving into exactly that, the potential secrets behind Japanese longevity. So today, we're going to take a deep dive into your sources and unpack some of the key insights.
That's the plan. Our mission here is to go through this material you've provided and, distill the most important nuggets for you.
Okay.
We're going to look at specific dietary habits, certain food components, and broader lifestyle principles that are highlighted in these sources as potentially contributing to those long, healthy lives in Japan.
Right.
And just to be clear, we're exploring what the information suggests, not really offering medical advice, but helping you make sense of the research and the different perspectives presented.
Absolutely. And it's a great mix of sources we've got here. Pieces that dig into fascinating specifics like green tea, the surprising power of small fish, fermented foods, alongside wisdom from centenarians, and actually a really helpful article on how to look critically at nutrition science itself.
Yeah, that one's useful.
It really is. Okay, let's unpack this.
So let's start with the big picture that comes through in the sources. Japan consistently ranks right at the top globally for life expectancy.
Right up there.
The numbers are pretty impressive. One source noted that back in 2019, over 2 million people in Japan were 90 or older, with more than 71,000 centenarians.
Wow.
And the materials you shared really emphasize that diet and lifestyle are seen as fundamental to this, almost reinforcing that traditional idea of food as medicine.
Yeah, that phrase comes up. When I was looking through the descriptions of the traditional Japanese diet and the materials, one thing that really struck me was how balanced it sounded compared to many Western diets.
Yeah.
What were the core components highlighted in your sources?
Well, the emphasis is heavily on seafood, soybeans, fermented foods, and tea.
Okay.
The sources point out a lower consumption of red meat, particularly beef, less sugar, fewer potatoes and dairy products, and a different approach to fruit compared to many other diets.
Interesting.
It's often described as one of the most balanced dietary patterns globally.
And within that diet, there are specific eating habits that the sources call out, right? Like eating slowly. The Times of India source mentioned that explicitly.
It did, and it connects proper chewing, not just to digestion, but also framing meal times as important for social connection. It slows things down,
Right.
allowing you to savor the food and, the company.
Which feels linked to the whole concept of portion control that also came up. It seems Japanese culture, based on these sources, doesn't really encourage eating until you're absolutely stuffed.
Exactly. They use smaller plates kind of as a cultural norm, and the goal is to feel satisfied but not overly full. This leads directly to that famous principle you saw mentioned, hara hati banmi.
Eat till you are 80% full.
It sounds so simple, but the sources you provided really dig into the why behind it. What did you find there?
Well, the material, especially the YouTube transcripts referencing Okinawan culture and scientific views, explains that this isn't just like folk wisdom. There's potential biological backing.
Okay.
Moderate caloric restriction done without causing malnutrition is strongly linked in research to lower risks of obesity, heart disease, and diabetes, major contributors to aging.
Makes sense.
And overeating actually increases oxidative stress, producing more free radicals that can damage cells. So by stopping at 80%, you reduce that metabolic strain.
Right.
It can improve insulin sensitivity and helps regulate hormones that control hunger and fullness, making it easier to manage weight long term.
Okay.
The sources also suggest this practice might activate autophagy.
Well, it's cellular self-cleaning process, just by not stuffing yourself. That's fascinating.
It is.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
what does this really mean for application? It's about tuning into your body's signals, isn't it? More mindful eating. Precisely. It's moving away from an empty plate mentality to a satisfied body mentality, which is a subtle but potentially impactful shift highlighted across several pieces you shared.
Okay, so that covers some of the habits. Let's transition to some specific foods that were really highlighted in the sources you included, starting with tea. Japan is obviously famous for tea.
Definitely. And the Healthline source specifically focused on green tea. It emphasized that green tea is loaded with antioxidant compounds called polyphenols,
Right, polyphenols.
specifically catechins like EGCG. These are powerful plant compounds that help protect your cells from damage.
And the list of potential benefits from that source was pretty extensive. though I appreciated how it noted where the evidence was strong or mixed, or where more human studies were needed.
Yeah, that's important.
It said green tea may improve cognitive function, citing one study linking it to a significantly lower chance of cognitive impairment, cautioned that more human trials are needed.
Right. And it could assist with fat burning, though the source suggests the effect is likely small and maybe more noticeable when combined with exercise.
For cancer risk, the evidence seemed quite mixed and inconsistent in the reviews cited, showing modest effects in lab studies, but not consistent effects on overall cancer rates in humans. And while it may protect the brain from aging, linked to lower Alzheimer's markers in some studies, there was that interesting counterpoint that very high consumption, like over 13 cups of any tea, was linked to an increased risk of Alzheimer's markers in a different study. So nuance is definitely needed here.
Absolutely. Other potential benefits included possible help for oral health, though often based on non-human studies, and may help manage blood sugar. Short-term effects on fasting sugar were noted, but long-term benefits are less clear. Although one study linked daily use to a lower chance of death from type 2 diabetes in Chinese adults.
It might also help prevent heart disease by positively impacting risk factors like blood pressure and cholesterol. But the Healthline piece correctly pointed out the lack of consistent long-term human clinical trials to firmly establish cause and effect there.
Crucial distinction.
And again, on weight loss, mixed findings. One study linked 4+ cups daily to lower abdominal obesity in women, but it didn't seem to directly curb appetite hormones.
So, not a magic bullet there. The source did conclude that green tea might contribute to longer life due to these protective compounds, citing research from Japan linking 5+ cups daily to lower overall mortality, and another study linking 7 cups daily to a significantly decreased death risk even after a heart attack.
Wow.
So, based on the source, a suggested target for potential benefits is maybe 3 to 5 cups, about 24-40 ounces daily, but it advises staying under 10 cups because of the caffeine content.
Right, caffeine. You know, out of all the specific foods mentioned in the sources you included, the focus on small theory was one I found really fascinating. What did the research you pulled together highlight about them?
Yeah, that study in public health nutrition you included was specific on this. It found that habitually eating small fish, like sardines or young sweet fish, was linked to a lower risk of death, particularly noticeable among Japanese women in that study.
Interesting. Particularly women.
The trend was there for men too, but it wasn't statistically significant in that specific cohort.
And the reason these small fish might be so incredibly potent is something I hadn't fully appreciated before looking at your sources. The health source explained it's because they're so nutrient dense, especially because they're typically eaten whole.
Exactly.
Bones, heads, even organs included.
That's the key insight, isn't it? Eating them whole means you're getting a wealth of nutrients like calcium, vitamin D, and vitamin A from the bones and other parts.
Right.
In addition to the protein and omega-3 fatty acids you'd get from the flesh.
Exactly. Beyond that nutrient density, the sources listed benefits like supporting bone health, obviously, with all that calcium, immune function, heart health, muscle, skin, metabolism.
A whole list.
Yeah. They may also reduce inflammation. Plus, they're often considered more sustainable and have fewer environmental toxins compared to larger predatory fish.
That's a good point, too. And the source offered practical tips for you, the listener. Small fish like anchovies, sardines, herring. They're readily available canned.
Easy to find.
Aiming for at least 2 servings per week is suggested to potentially reap these health benefits.
Okay, let's move on to another major component you highlighted. Fermented foods. They came up in multiple sources. Times of India, Gior Unavi, the PMC article, the Healthline Okinawa piece, clearly a cornerstone of the Japanese diet.
They really are. Fermentation is an ancient preservation technique, but as the sources explain, it also adds nutritional value and creates those unique flavors and textures. There's been a huge resurgence in interest linked to potential benefits for gut health, which in turn affects, the brain and overall body.
And miso is introduced as maybe the most fundamental fermented food in Japanese cooking, that soybean paste with its distinct savory umami flavor.
Oh, yeah, miso. The PMC source gave a good overview. It's typically made through a 2-step fermentation process involving koji mold, soybeans, salt, and water.
Right, koji.
It's highlighted for its high protein and isoflavone content.
And the list of potential therapeutic properties for miso in the sources was quite extensive. What stood out to you from that list?
The range of potential benefits is striking. On the gastrointestinal side, it was linked to a lower risk of gastritis and ulcers, and potentially having anti-H. pylori activity,
Oh, wow.
which is a big one since that bacteria is linked to stomach issues and cancer.
Definitely.
The sources also mentioned it contains enzymes and fiber that are thought to aid digestion and even help clean the intestines, with beneficial microbes potentially helping decompose harmful compounds.
That gut link seems consistent with the general focus on fermented foods. And what about cancer?
Fermented soy products, including miso, have been linked to reduced cancer risk in various types of studies, cell, animal, and observational human studies. There's potential suggested against stomach, breast, and liver cancers in the sources.
And for cholesterol and heart health, what do the sources say?
Well, soy foods in general are known for lowering blood cholesterol, and miso contains compounds like plant sterols and linoleic acid that are potentially cardioprotective. Some studies mentioned showed reduced cholesterol and even lower heart rate, particularly in winter, though more research is always needed, of course.
Hypertension, high blood pressure seemed like an interesting one because the findings seemed a little mixed in the sources.
They were. Some studies showed no effect on existing high blood pressure, which is important to note.
Right.
However, others suggested a negative relationship with the progress of high blood pressure in individuals who started with normal blood pressure, so potentially more relevant for prevention than treatment based on that information.
Got it. And anti-obesity effects were mentioned too.
Yes, the sources suggested that soy isoflavones and protein in miso might help reduce fat formation, distribution, and even the size and number of fat cells.
And that fascinating historical note from the PMC source about the belief, backed by some animal studies, that miso helped eliminate radioactive components from the body after events like the atomic bombings. That's truly unique.
It is a striking historical claim, though the source notes the need for more robust study there.
Where?
The PMC source also mentioned the LPS neutralizing protein as a possible probiotic agent that could help against intestinal inflammation, which again ties back to the gut benefits.
The GRU Navi source quickly touched on other fermented soy foods as well. Shoyu, or soy sauce, as a key seasoning with digestive antioxidants.
Right.
And natto, those famously. Sticky fermented soybeans, known for high protein, fiber, and enzymes that may reduce blood clotting and produce vitamin.
Natto, yeah. Love it or hate it, apparently.
Exactly. And of course, sukumano, pickles,
Yeah.
as common side dishes.
Right, and pulling back to the bigger picture again, the YouTube source referencing Dr. Ishihara also suggested limiting solid meals, ideally 1 or 2 per day, and really emphasizing a plant-based whole food diet. That includes lots of vegetables, seaweed, fermented foods like miso and natto, fish, legumes like soybeans, and whole grains like brown rice and barley.
So a whole dietary pattern approach.
Exactly. The thinking there is that this type of diet supports processes like autophagy and the body's natural cleansing mechanisms.
So it's not just about adding specific foods, but also how you eat them, the timing, and the overall pattern. A really holistic view coming through in these sources.
Exactly. And that holistic view expands beyond just food. The sources you shared also highlighted broader lifestyle factors for longevity, drawing particularly on the insights of Dr. Shugaki Hinahara, who lived to the incredible age of 105.
Hinahara's principles sounded wonderfully practical and insightful. What were some of the key ones that stood out from your sources?
His philosophy was very much about living a full, engaged life. Key points included staying active, not necessarily hitting the gym hard, but incorporating movement into daily life, like always taking the stairs.
Simple things.
He also stressed staying engaged in work or passion. He worked actively well past 100, arguing that staying busy with meaningful pursuits keeps the mind stimulated and gives you a strong reason to get up every day.
That purpose piece.
Which connects strongly to the concept of Nikigai, finding that purpose in life. It's seen as fundamental, particularly in Okinawan centenarians. Keeps both your mind and body in motion.
Yeah.
Managing stress through positivity, joy, strong friendships, and avoiding holding on to grudges was also something he emphasized as crucial for physical health.
Makes sense. Giving to others and contributing to society was another core belief. Acts of kindness and community engagement contributing to a longer, happier life.
Absolutely. And importantly, lifelong learning and staying creative, keeping the mind sharp to prevent cognitive decline.
His own approach to diet was notably simple and moderate. He ate consistently, but emphasized keeping weight in check. He had this great quote you highlighted. All people who live long share one thing in common. None are overweight.
Pretty direct.
It is. He also mentioned he rarely felt hungry because he was so absorbed in his work.
That's fascinating, linking focus and purpose directly to eating habits.
Yeah. These broader principles really seem to connect with the insights from other Japanese scientists and doctors you mentioned, like Dr. Osumi's Nobel-winning work on autophagy.
They do. Dr. Osumi's work revealed the body's crucial cellular self-cleaning and recycling process, autophagy, and how it can be activated by things like fasting or stress. Dr. Teruya's research further supported the metabolic benefits of fasting, suggesting it enhances metabolism, boosts antioxidants, and has anti-aging potential.
Okay.
And Dr. Shinya emphasized enzyme-rich, plant-based foods and hydration for gut health and supporting internal cleansing.
So there's this consistent thread across different sources, from centenarian wisdom to cutting-edge science, pointing towards practices like harahachi banmi, potentially modified fasting approaches, and nutrient-dense diets that seem to leverage these natural bodily systems.
Exactly. It's about working with the body's inherent processes, a theme that runs through much of the material you provided.
So what does this all mean? We've taken a tour through some truly fascinating insights from your sources on Japanese longevity, looking at specific foods, eating habits, and the broader lifestyle principles.
And for you, the listener, as you engage with information like this, it's worth acknowledging, as one of your sources did, that with so much out there, it's easy to feel confused, especially when headlines can be conflicting.
Oh, definitely. That clickbait nutrition source was incredibly insightful into why that happens. It explained that headlines often sensationalize or oversimplify complex scientific findings just to grab attention.
Right.
A study confirming something we already suspected gets less buzz than a controversial one, which can create a skewed public perception.
A crucial point it raised is the difference between correlation and causation. Much human nutrition research is observational. It looks at patterns, like asking what people eat and tracking their health outcomes. This can show links, but it can't prove that one thing caused the other. The example it used was a study linking French fries to mortality. It might show a link, but people who eat a lot of French fries are probably also doing other things less healthy.
Yeah, the whole lifestyle package.
Exactly, making it hard to pinpoint the cause.
Right, it's not the French fry itself causing death, perhaps, but maybe the lifestyle surrounding it. And the source stressed that a single study never proves anything. You have to look at the totality of the evidence over time.
Absolutely. It also touched on study funding, noting that food industries often sponsor research. And while that doesn't automatically invalidate the findings, it's something to be aware of and look for disclosure on.
Good point. And the source gave some really practical tips for you, the listener, on how to evaluate nutrition information beyond just reading the headline. It suggested reading the whole article, trying to find a link to the actual study to see what kind of study it was. Was it on humans?
Yeah.
Animals? Cells?
Yeah. What type it was?
Observational? Experimental? And who funded it?
Digging a little deeper. It also advised using common sense. If something sounds too good or too bad to be true, it probably is.
Trust your gut sometimes.
Consider the historical context. If people have eaten a food for generations without obvious harm, a single study claiming it's suddenly deadly might need extra scrutiny.
Right.
And critically, don't make major diet changes based on one study. Always talk to a doctor or qualified health professional. That empowers you to be a more informed consumer of information.
So to loop back to where we started, we've taken this deep dive into the sources you sent us on Japanese longevity. We've looked at the characteristics of the diet, specific components like green tea, small fish, and fermented foods like miso and natto. We explored eating habits like harahachi banmi and delved into the broader lifestyle wisdom from figures like Dr. Hanahara.
And what comes through is a blend of specific nutrient-dense foods, mindful eating practices that encourage listening to your body, and a holistic approach to life that emphasizes purpose, movement, connection, and continuous learning.
And while these sources highlight many intriguing links and potential benefits, it's clear, as the material pointed out, that research is ongoing. Findings can be mixed.
For sure.
And it's about understanding principles and possibilities, not finding some guaranteed formula or strict rules.
This deep dive was about extracting the key nuggets from your stack of sources, giving you a more nuanced picture to help you feel well-informed on this topic.
And perhaps the final thought to leave you with, building on these sources, if adopting even just a few simple principles, like maybe trying some fermented food, being a little more mindful of eating until you're only 80% full, or finding ways to stay more engaged with your passions could potentially contribute to living not just a longer life, but one that feels more fulfilling. What small step might you consider exploring today?